Hey Plus Ultra fam and the Ronin clan. We're sorry this one took a little longer than the last few parts have taken to get out, but we're hoping these next two parts will make up for that. If you haven't yet, I still highly recommend you guys go and check out Ronin's channel and the content on it. He's only been getting better since we started this project. Now, back to our story. Misty and Ash's anger towards each other was then aimed at Brock for what they perceived as a stupid idea that wouldn't solve their issue until he pushed the poster further into their faces and put his foot down. Brock was tired of the arguing between Ash and Misty and the constant care he had to give to their Pokemon. He felt like he'd hit a wall with his caretaking skills, and he needed to overcome that before he too was comfortable moving on in their journey. It wasn't just Misty. Ash argues back as he takes the poster and reads it more closely, but he felt like Brock was just tired or worse being lazy, and not seeing that as a good reason for the group to split up, as he thought they all had a good thing going on. Though, as he recognized three names specifically on the sign-up area for the competition, he froze. He'd already been confused by it, as with his love for battles, he'd memorized nearly every major cancel tournament there was that wasn't the Indigo League, and he'd never heard of a major SSN tournament. Misty snaps at him, as he was blatantly giving them the ultimatum of following him against their will or splitting up anyway. It was horrible of him to accuse Brock of just being lazy when he was looking to advance his skills just like Ash was. Surprisingly, Ash didn't respond, as Brock, ever the mediator, elaborated that Ash and Krokorok were the main driving force behind this, as in some of their battles, particularly the ones where Moxie got activated, their opponents were left in a state of critical condition requiring medical attention. That statement gave Ash pause, and had him finally glancing up from the poster's trainer roster with a bit of a guilty look, as he had been getting more confident with Moxie boosts as of late, and it wasn't rare for he and Krokorok to both lose themselves in the heat of battle, as any boost below a 5 they could pretty well handle now. With a sigh, Ash apologizes to his friends. Being a sponsored trainer of Giovanni made him really anxious to keep a good pace on their journey. After losing to Silver, that had only gotten worse. But he definitely wasn't so immature as to rush so hard he abandoned his buddies or got someone hurt. Not to mention, this SSN tournament sounded right up his alley, as was already stacked, so he was on board with Brock's idea for splitting up for a month. Misty scoffs at the quick change of heart, while Brock looks very pleased Ash saw reason so easily. That's when Ash passed Misty the tournament sign-up sheet, where she noticed at least one familiar name, Silver. Ash wanted payback, which she could understand. Though she wasn't about to be overlooked, she grabbed a pen from Brock and went to sign herself and Ash up for the competition as well, before pointing a finger into his chest and pinning the poster against it, as she vowed to get stronger than Ash over the month. He was confused at first, before smiling and grabbing the poster in one hand, while taking Misty's hand and clasping it in the other, to accept her challenge, while boasting for her to give it all she had, inadvertently holding her hand in the process and making her quickly eject away from him in embarrassment. Misty would get to do her special training to defeat Lieutenant Surge, and Brock had the hard task of convincing Vermilion's nurse Joy to allow him to temporarily apprentice under her, as he was certain she must have had all kinds of expert first aid knowledge for Pokemon care. When the time came, Brock and Misty walked with Ash and Meowth to the edge of Vermilion City, where the team gave a temporary farewell and promised to meet back up in the city in a month from today for the SSN tournament. And with that, they all went their separate ways.
Meowth let out a sigh of relief as it could now speak openly, though he was still stuck with his trainer Ash, and was admittedly confused on his feelings about it. He'd been creating some genuine bonds with the Pokemon Ash wielded, translating so much. Even Misty and Brock's Pokemon were pleasant enough to be around. Not to mention, he knew he'd miss Brock's cooking. Not so much hearing Misty and his trainer argue, so the reprieve for his ears was much appreciated. However, it wasn't long they traveled down the route before inevitably Ash's eyes met with those of another trainer, and he began battling once again. Though he was keeping in mind to rotate his head battlers, so Krokorok wasn't abusing the Moxie boost on weaker Pokemon, and it was better for the team's growth. Meowth still had small tendencies that was holding it back in battle, and it even seemed to be on the verge of evolving its Scratch into the much more powerful Slash. Fearow was mostly a matter of finding more synchronicity with his most mature team member. There were certain points in the battle where she liked to pull back and observe her opponent before taking advantage of a split-second opening for effortless finishes. And Oddish. The issue with her was a bit rougher to handle. They made it past Route 11 when Ash and Meowth came to realize Oddish's aspirations for beauty were very much affecting her battle style. Meowth confirmed that she was aware on how to use different types of poison moves, but she simply refused to, as the techniques for her seemed unsightly and ungraceful. Not to mention she was struggling to hold back her evolution until an interesting development took place. Deciding to use Oddish in battle against a trainer's strong-looking Dugtrio, and just narrowly taking the win due to her Mega Drain, Oddish began to grow brighter than ever and actually started to cry hysterically, as she sensed that she would be unable to keep herself from evolving any longer. Ash tried to provide comfort, but to his surprise, Meowth simply ran up to Oddish before tying something on the head of the grass sprout Pokemon. The glow instantly stopped, and Oddish looked bewildered, as Ash recognized what the object had been. "Isn't that the rock that Silver had on Totodile?" Meowth gloomily returns to his side, with an elated Oddish dancing around him. Trying to cuddle the now grumpy cat in appreciation, he clambered back to Ash's shoulder. "Yeah, he didn't grab it after that match we had, and I honestly ain't too keen on evolving myself." He was once again surprised when Ash began to pet him behind the ears. Ash thanked him for his selflessness, and promised to search for another Everstone if he truly didn't want to evolve. Also, he ordered him to quit with all the stealing. He was getting bad habits, which got a genuine laugh out of Meowth, as Ash and it made it to the end of the route. Meanwhile, back in Vermilion, and behind his Pokemon Center in a small battle area, Misty was hard at work with her training, mostly focused on Starmie and Squirtle. Her current plan was to attempt more long-term specialized training with Starmie, as she recognized it had an entire second typing that she wasn't taking advantage of. The only reason she wanted to help it learn the technique Thunderbolt was because she wanted to use it against the other Waterflower sisters, and as a possible deterrent to help her control Gyarados. But there was only so much she could do as a novice to truly master the technique. It forced her to do a lot of research, which was much harder without a Pokédex. She wanted to help Starmie learn the psychic type move Light Screen to reduce the damage from electric attacks, and a Steel Silver strategy of teaching the water type move Dig to avoid electricity. Her hope was that with these new moves and the correct use of Starmie's recovery and Squirtle's Mirror Coat would see her through the proverbial storm.
In reality though, she was having a lot of trouble not only executing this plan, but also maintaining her motivation with all the setbacks. Angrily, she recognized that without Ash around, she is finding it hard to focus on training. And worst of all, with Brock hard at work in his bid for Nurse Joy's recognition, she rarely had anyone but her Pokemon to talk to about this issue over the last couple of days. That's why currently she found herself exhausted and gazing up at the night sky with Squirtle and Starmie, while at a total loss for what to do next. That's when in the dark of the woods, the trio heard a twig snapping, followed by the sound of a threatening growl and an eerie orange light coming into view as something stalked close to them. Now at least with some stimulation, Misty and her Pokemon jumped back to their feet, ready to face whatever wild Pokemon wanted a piece of them. She was even about to call for preemptive attacks when the creature grew close enough to recognize. It was a Charmeleon, and one in terrible condition from the looks of it. Actually, it was more familiar than that. It was the exact same Charmeleon that had refused joining Ash's team to travel with them. But what was it doing here? Regardless, it was very clearly exhausted and likely hadn't eaten anything. So immediately, Misty ran to the Pokemon Center to get Brock and Nurse Joy, where she learned that he'd finally been successful in earning his apprenticeship while helping to finally get a ton of Lieutenant Surge's former victims out of the shock unit. Thankfully, the lieutenant had taken the past few days off of battling, so now was a perfect time to catch up, and Nurse Joy eventually agreed to take Brock on as her nursing assistant for the month. And it was a good thing too, as they now had a new patient to treat.
Back with Ash, the battling had become non-stop. Surprisingly, the route was packed with both fishermen and random trainers, to the point that Ash found himself in a round robin, so to speak, as he battled trainers left and right, while a crowd began to form and cheer on the young talented trainer. There was even a randomly noticeable cute girl who would begin to announce and referee the battles, with a lot of praise and affection toward him, without really showing the same to his opponents, which made him pretty proud and overconfident. After around an hour, when his Pokemon finally started tiring and the crowd cleared out, the announcer girl stayed behind. She accompanied Ash partially up the route before he had to stop to use the bathroom. Unexpectedly, the girl had run up behind him and pushed him into the water as she stole his wallet fattened with all of his winnings from today's battles. Enraged at being the one who was robbed and being drenched in water, Meowth burst out of the water with his claws extended, ready to give chase, and rend the girl to ribbons. Before Ash called him, "Don't bother," he says as he pulls himself back to the pier, as he began to squeeze all the water out of his clothes while using some pretty harsh language he had been picking up from Meowth, who had mirrored him as he returned to his side, shaking off the water. "Geez, Ash, I didn't know you were such a potty mouth," a voice called out, causing Ash to look around, and it changed his frown to a large smile as he recognized Richie.
The two happily began to catch up with each other, due to the nearly 2 months since they last seen one another. Meanwhile, Meowth was upset he once again had to hold his tongue, as even though Richie was technically in the same category of Torp as Ash, and likely someone he could trust with his secret, he wasn't sure just how deep in the Team Rocket introduction process the boss had cooked up for the kids he was. Come to think of it, he'd been pretty slack on his pushing of Ash down that road himself, as there often wasn't time to do so, and beyond that, the kid was annoyingly naive and innocent only when it came to the matters of Pokemon and profit. Maybe if Jesse and James hadn't ditched him, they'd be further along by now. That also brought to mind what those idiots were doing without his leadership to guide them, and the question of where Richie's Team Rocket shadows were. He was brought out of his thoughts when he realized that Ash and Richie had cleared the rest of the dock and now stood on a sandy shore with a sign that read they were close to Lavender Town. The two had already stepped apart to engage in a battle. First out for Richie was a Butterfree he called Happy and claimed was his first catch. With a bit of a cruel smirk, Meowth noticed Ash confidently sent out Fearow to show off his own first catch. Richie and Happy seemed a bit intimidated at first, but after a deep breath, the two synchronized and were ready for battle. As they usually like to do, Ash and Fearow started off with agility to vastly increase their speed, while Richie was put on the defensive in order to harden to hopefully keep his bug type in the battle longer. From there, it was a call for Aerial Ace by Ash, which Happy had no choice but to take full on. Though surprisingly, countered with a string shot that Fearow had to shake off unless she were to crash into the ground, vastly slowing her down as Richie then called for Happy to use his Poison Powder and Whirlwind combo, as the toxic dust fluttered off of the bug's wings, which Fearow was flying headlong into, as the winds barely even forced it to budge, though the Poison Powder inside of it successfully caused a poisoning. and more importantly to Richie, forced Fearow to return to his Pokeball to Ash's confusion as Richie explained how it worked. All while Meowth was forcefully dragged onto the makeshift battlefield of the beach. Though currently, he really wasn't in the mood for a battle, so he went right back to Ash's side. With a frown, Ash was forced to call back out his now poison flying type. Though now, Fearow was a tad enraged. At first, she was only a bit annoyed at being forced to battle a mere bug that was actually challenging her. So from there, the battle became a lose-lose for both trainers as Fearow was on a time limit, and Happy couldn't avoid long enough or hit hard enough to outlast the bird, resulting in a double knockout when all was said and done. Luckily, the two had decided on a 3-on-3, so it was on to the next battle, in which, considering Meowth's current attitude at the moment, Ash decided to start off the next battle with Oddish, since she was also enjoying the fruits of no longer having to hold back her evolution. Now with the ability to abuse a type advantage himself, Richie sent out to the field a gorgeous and obviously well cared for Vulpix that he called Foxy, explaining this was one of his most recent team members, but already his second most powerful due to her being raised by a world-renowned breeder named Susie that he met on Scissor Street. Just as undaunted as Richie was earlier, Ash decided to appropriate an idea from Richie by asking Oddish to mix her sweet scent and sleep powder techniques, which Richie had an instant counter for in having Foxy use Quick Attack to flee the cloud of fragrance and sleep-inducing powder while shooting off an Ember attack to burn it away that Oddish fearfully dodged. With that unsuccessful and Ash unable to use his grass and poison type's poison moves, he quickly found himself on the back foot and ordering nothing but Mega Drains and dodges. Richie and Foxy were picking them apart, and that's when a different glow than Ash had ever seen from her began to emit from Oddish as a pink light focused at Oddish's mouth and she yelled with determination, creating a small orb right in front of her, which she then fired right into the Vulpine fire type's face, as Foxy released not an ember, but a flamethrower, showing the two had both grown during the battle and learned new moves.
When the smoke cleared, Oddish was down, while Foxy was able to remain awake, celebrating by bouncing back to Richie in order to nuzzle against his leg and demand his praise and affection, somewhat reminded Ash how Fearow could get sometimes. That brought the battle to 1 tie and 1 loss in Richie's favor. Knowing there was no other way to close out the battle, Ash sent out Krokorok, as this would give the two the chance to activate Moxie. However, Richie quickly thanked Vulpix for her hard work and returned it, forfeiting the 3rd match to his friend, as he claimed Susie had asked him to take care of Foxy while giving it some much needed battle experience to help it grow. He wasn't going to purposely endanger it. Ash could respect that, though Krokorok snorted sand for being denied a warm-up battle. Richie, however, grinned as he announced that he wanted these two Pokemon to duke it out at full throttle. He called out something he nicknamed Dune, as a bug-like creature Ash had never seen before took to the field, flapping its wings at high speed, prompting Ash to pull out the Pokédex for some last-minute info on the creature. From it, he learned that it was a Vibrava, and it was actually a ground dragon type, not a bug. That's what Trapinch evolves into? Silver was right. That is kind of unfair. Ash griped, to which Krokorok took offense to this, and it turned around to kick sand at him, while griping in a striking similar way to his trainer that he was much better than some bug. The sand, however, hit Meowth, who still seemed occupied either looking around for something or in deep thought, though that brought him out of it as he nearly joined the two in a childish argument, before clamping his paws over his mouth, keeping him from being heard, while Richie and Vibrava looked on utterly confused and asked Ash if they were going to continue the battle. Ash and Krokorok synced up as Richie and Dune did, and the battle was on, with Ash quickly ordering Krokorok to approach through the ground, then nail Dune with a crunch. Richie masterfully told his partner to fly a tad higher and counter with the bug buzz, causing Ash's partner to be stopped in his tracks as it burst from digging through the ground to clasp his hands over its ears in pain. Richie reminded Ash, just because ground and dragon were his strongest moves, doesn't mean that he didn't pack other things into their arsenal. He had Dune learn bug type moves just for Ash and Krokorok. However, Ash told Richie to take his own advice as he used Stone Edge at a close range, making it impossible to dodge. This easily gets a critical hit off, no matter how much Dune resists it. The attack even knocked Dune out of the air, giving Ash and Krokorok a chance to pounce on it with another crunch, though Richie did counter with a Dragon Tail, causing the two starter Pokemon to clash until Krokorok finally overpowered Dune and slammed it by its tail, flinging it back again. Richie recognizes the power difference and switches up his strategy to prioritize Dune's speed and distance attacks by having him use Quick Attack to get away and fire off moves such as Dragon's Breath, Supersonic, and Bug Buzz. But Ash recognizes that Krokorok has to dodge and get around in order to win, so he tells him to travel through the ground to avoid them. But Richie just sent Dune in after him, as the ground type it makes it almost as good at digging as Krokorok is. Almost.
Ash boasted to Richie that he really ought to enjoy his dominance of the skies, because the earth was his domain, as he ordered Krokorok to turn up the speed and go on a frenzy with crunch attacks, while Richie quickly realized his mistake as he got to see just how fast Ash and Krokorok really were. The ground began to almost rumble, as the evidence of something large digging underneath at high speed was really evident. It looked like a herd of Onyx had been through the place, and within moments, Krokorok and Dune came bursting from the sand, with Dune obviously the worst for wear. Knowing this would be his final move, Richie called for a Dragon Tail mixed with a quick attack to use everything Dune had left. Not one to ever back down, Ash told Krokorok to do the same by gaining speed by digging and using his crunch attack one more time. The resulting clash was the most powerful either trainer had ever been a part of. However, it ended in Krokorok being the clear winner and Richie conceding his first rival battle to Ash as a loss. Though, he seemed so happy to have had such a great match that he didn't complain about it, this being his second major loss in a short time. Curious, Ash asks to who, to which Richie responds by telling him he was just coming from Lavender Town. Turns out, there's a secret gym there with badges officially recognized by the Indigo League. Back in Vermilion with Misty and Brock, it turned out that all Charmeleon needed was a good night's rest and a good meal to make a full recovery. During its checkup, Nurse Joy had Brock to assess his condition, and Brock concluded that it had done all the damage to itself during training. It was extremely dirty, as if it had been underground for long periods of time. And once Misty explained Charmeleon's backstory, an apparent rival with Ash's Krokorok, in fact, just hearing the Pokemon's name made its tail flame grow and eyes narrow. Nurse Joy hypothesized that Charmeleon had been hard at work learning the move Dig. It wasn't uncommon for Pokemon to learn moves they were capable of after being defeated by a Pokemon who'd mastered it. As for why it had been following them, the Charizard line were notoriously fierce battlers, so she suspected that Charmeleon was ready for its rematch and simply followed Ash and Krokorok's scent to the last place they'd spent the most time, being the Pokemon Center, something Charmeleon tried to play off as untrue. With a clean bill of health now, Charmeleon was released, though it strangely just stuck next to Misty as she sought to return to her training that morning. It was pretty much just relaxing and sitting around now, though it kinda ticked Misty off as it was a bit distracting, so she actually decided to change her training location to the coastline off Vermilion. This also offered the nice change of pace of a waterfront to train by, where Misty made the decision to also allow Goldeen out for some training since it had been very neglected lately. However, Charmeleon only followed her again before plopping right back down the way it had earlier, once again ticking Misty off. She even ordered Squirtle to fire off a warning shot bubble attack to run it off. She didn't care if this thing was destined to be Ash's Pokemon or something, she just didn't want any reminders of him around her right now. Effortlessly, Charmeleon simply cracked an eye and burst out an Ember attack which exploded midair with Bubble. Misty then stormed up to Charmeleon, which to her was starting to kinda seem like Ash. Smug, annoying, and strong, but almost to the point of making everything they did seem super easy. She then ordered Charmeleon to get away from her. She didn't know where Ash was, but he'd be coming back at some point, so there was no reason to stalk her. However, Charmeleon matched her fire by getting back in her face and roaring back at her. Something not lost on her resembled the exact way Ash and her would bicker. During the commotion though, Charmeleon wildly swung around its arms in exasperation and accidentally knocked a Pokeball off of Misty's belt, Gyarados' Pokeball.
With a ferocious roar, the atrocious Pokemon appears, instantly getting everyone's attention. It began to look around, then noticing it number 1 wasn't being offered food, and number 2 it didn't see that pesky Onix or Golem anywhere around. Peering down at Misty, Gyarados almost grew a sadistic grin, before its face turned to one of rage, as it swung its massive tail at the girl, who once again was froze, though she was saved by Starmie, Goldeen, and Squirtle, firing Bubble, Water Gun, and Thunderbolt at the rampaging teammate, with Charmeleon tackling the girl out of the way while growling at her. It then surged back to its feet, fire in its eyes, obviously excited at the challenge at such a strong opponent. It used this as a warm-up for its triumph over that dumb Krokorok, and lunged into battle alongside Starmie and the others, as Gyarados continued to thrust while moving toward the water. Misty began to almost feel like she knew what Charmeleon and Gyarados had said to her. They called her weak, and if there's one emotion that could easily overtake her fear, it was the burning rage, as she began to give the massive group of Pokemon impromptu raid battle orders. Charmeleon obviously deciding to ignore most of it. If Gyarados wanted to see her strength, then she'd demonstrate it. In the excitement though, she ended up stomping on a weird hill in the sand and being knocked on her butt as something hard burst out of it. A shelter had buried itself on the beach and didn't seem too happy that its nap was interrupted as Missy began to apologize and pointed over to Gyarados while explaining the situation, actually having her eyes widen as a red blur zoomed towards the two, and she had to dodge as Charmeleon came flying across the beach and slammed into the spot where her and Shelter both stood, with swirls in its eyes as it had been knocked out. Luckily for it, Gyarados was poorly trained and didn't have any water type moves that were long range, so Charmeleon wasn't too hurt. However, she finally notices Goldeen and Squirtle had been defeated as Starmie was fighting by itself. Though seeing Gyarados finally snatch it up with the bite, Misty called out to it in distress, causing Shelter to sigh. While she held it, the air around them grew cold, as a freezing beam of energy shot out of its mouth directly at Gyarados' head, making it woozy before it fell into the water unconscious. Misty then thanked Shelter and praised it for how strong it was, as she realized she had no way to get Charmeleon back to the Pokemon Center for healing, which she lamented about. Shelter then sighed again, using its ice beam on the ground, creating a slick path towards the town that Misty then realized she can easily slide the fire type on. With the help of Shelter sitting on her head and a simple hold on Charmeleon's horn to help drag its unconscious weight behind her, she successfully returned the entire party back to Brock and Nurse Joy, who began to berate her for coming back so soon with the full team of injured Pokemon. As the two went off to begin treatment, she realized Shelter was still with her, though it had quickly fallen asleep, so she decided to thank it by offering it a big feast while she waited. After talking for a bit, Misty asked Shelter if it'd be willing to join her on her journey to become a water-type master. Instead of sighing tiredly, Shelter this time sighed happily as Misty produced a Pokeball and it touched it with its tongue, bringing Misty's team to 5. Meanwhile, in Lavender Town, Ash and Richie come to the Pokemon Center to heal their Pokemon. First, the duo do some calling back to their families and Professor Oak. After those calls are done, the two grouped up on a single video call and make a call to their sponsor for a quick progress report, once again being surprised for Giovanni picking up quickly for his standards. This time, he seemed to be back in the Viridian gym, and once again, he held his cold yet charismatic smile as he greeted the two. They excitedly began to update Giovanni on information he mostly knew, yet couldn't reveal. During this, however, due to not wanting to be seen by the boss so close to Ash, and because he noticed two suspicious characters telling them on their way to the Pokemon Center, Meowth snuck away to investigate this, sneaking up behind him with his newly cultivated speed from all of the running that he and Ash had been doing, and using Thief to steal away their fairly obvious disguises, revealing Butch and Cassidy. In alarm, the two grabbed the cat Pokemon and before running outside, making sure that they weren't seen. Once outside, the two began to lay into Jesse and James's pet as it nearly blew their cover. Meowth then realized these two were ordered to tail Richie. Curious, he then asked what Richie knew about them, only for them to confusedly ask him what he meant, as they were ordered not to make contact with the targets. They then asked what he was doing traveling and interacting with his mark, and where were those idiots, Jesse and James.
At that question, before Meowth could begin to nervously explain the situation, a familiar motto began to be recited, causing him to by muscle memory finish it with Jesse and James as they appeared. Then, snapping back into reality, he angrily began to berate and attempt scratching them for ditching him with Ash. He too was curious what they'd been doing all this time. Jesse confidently bragged that while Meowth handled their menial grunt work and babysitting, they'd been traveling around by balloon and nabbing all kinds of powerful and rare Pokemon. She thought the boss would have been proud of them, if not for his getting in contact a few days ago to chew them out, as he had not only been receiving way too many updates from Meowth, but he'd finally checked Ash's team registration and learned that Meowth had joined him, so he pieced things together. They only came back to get Meowth before they were all punished severely. Angry at being ignored and not having had the opportunity to do what their rivals had done, Cassidy and Butch get in Jesse and James' face, berating them for not only breaking ranks, but doing it so nonchalantly. It seemed like a fight was about to break out, with Meowth confusedly in the middle of the stupidity, when a ringing in James and Butch's pockets began and the two produced portable communication devices more advanced than the ones Meowth had invented on the fly, to send Giovanni short memos with. Answering the call and putting the two devices together as the group gathered around, the enraged face of Giovanni appeared as he began to furiously yell at the 5 fools, asking what they were doing.
He had just held a 10-minute conversation with his students where he could clearly see 4 members of Team Rocket acting like idiots outside of the Pokemon Center. The 4 realized that they weren't in a disguise, so James quickly went about producing a clumsy and impromptu disguise. Giovanni sighed and wiped his hands down his face, explaining that this is the exact reason they weren't fit to be admins and were babysitting the future of Team Rocket. Confused, Jesse, James, and Meowth asked if they were admins, which Giovanni, Butch, Cassidy roar at them that of course they were. They got a massive budget, resources, and free reign to do what they wanted in Team Rocket's interest. Why did they think their training was so extensive? Exasperated now, Giovanni ignores the stupidity to address Meowth directly, something the cat Pokemon wasn't used to, and instantly wilts under the attention. Listen, forget your primary orders. Your mission is special now. You are Ash's Pokemon, and as such, you are now the best agent we have to get him to join Team Rocket. Your mission is to continue on your journey and mature the boy into an admin loyal to only me. Use the trust and love you've built with him to your advantage. Meowth is in shock at getting such an important task, and the realization he didn't actually hate it so much. Confidently, he nods and salutes the boss, before a thought dawned on him. Hey boss, I'm sure the twerp mentioned it to you, but you know your kid is challenging the league, right? And he's strong. He also says he's your enemy now, and he wants to crush everything associated with you.
Giovanni grew quiet before revealing that Ash had told him, but he'd known before even that, as he still had a team of spies watching Silver for updates. When the time came, he would discipline his son whatever means were necessary to make him fall in line. For now, the 4 human members of Team Rocket were to continue with their original orders. As for Jesse and James, he had heard they pretended to be ace trainers to gain Ash's trust, and so ordered them to use that to aid Meowth's mission however the cat saw fit. And with that, the transmission ended, leaving Jesse, James, Butch, and Cassidy slack-jawed as they all realized Meowth currently had more status than any of them. something that made Meowth turn around with a smug look on his face as he was just about to give them an order when he heard Ash calling for him outside the Pokemon Center. Rolling his eyes, he told his new grunts to get back to work and that he'd be in touch when he needed them. Once he got back to Ash, he really played up his happiness at being back with his trainer, jumping up on his shoulders and nuzzling against him in elation, as Ash pet him and remarked that he was happy that he was feeling better, because now that the team was all healed up, they were on their way to take on the secret gym that Richie had told him about. A little while later, the trio arrived at a small house where Richie knocked on the door and was greeted by a fairly old man who smiled down to Richie happily, remarking he was glad to see him back and asked if he wanted to battle again so soon. Richie nods no as Ash introduces himself and asks for a battle. The man who introduced himself as Mr. Fuji agreed to it, as in his old age, he had become bored fairly easily. After a brief walk in the woods full of Ash confusedly asking where the gym was, the group finally reached a clearing that seemed to have a massive rock in the middle of it. Until Ash realized it wasn't a rock, as Mr. Fuji walked behind it and announced that this was his partner Pokemon, Snorlax, and that they'd been together almost as long as he'd been alive. He then pulled out a flute and started to play a note on it. The ground shook a bit as the massive creature's snoring was interrupted, and it quickly pushed itself off its belly to sit up and look back at its trainer with a tired yet happy gaze, while Mr. Fuji patted it and deposited a massive bag of apples he'd been carrying in his paws before Snorlax chomped them down, plastic and all, and bounced to his feet ready for action.
Richie warned Ash that while Snorlax was the only Pokemon that Ash had to beat to get a badge, it was a massively powerful Pokemon. Mr. Fuji had already asked Ash how many Pokemon and badges he had, but now he confidently ordered Ash to use every member of his team. Sweating nervously though with a massive grin on his face, Ash prepared for his hardest gym battle yet, and he threw out his first Pokemon. Back in Vermilion, Lieutenant Surge had finally returned to the gym and was in the process of opening it back up when he heard a set of footsteps behind him, and he turned to see Misty accompanied by Charmeleon and Brock. Happy she decided to return, and noticing the fire type with her, he praised Misty and asked her if she caught something other than fish, but she simply ignored him and announced herself as Misty, Waterflower of the Cerulean City Gym, here to challenge him for a Thunder Badge. With a smirk, Surge accepts. Instead of joining Brock in the viewing area, Charmeleon decided rather to watch the battle up close and personal, and it plopped down right next to Misty's trainer box, as she and Surge take their positions. It made Misty almost feel like Ash was here to watch the battle. Surge tells Misty that since she only has a single badge, he's only going to use 2 Pokemon, something Misty was still offended by, but smartly did not argue with. First out from Surge was the same Elekid that single-handedly defeated Starmie and Squirtle. For Misty, however, her first Pokemon was Gyarados. Surge was more surprised than intimidated when seeing it, as he had no idea she had one, though Elekid was definitely intimidated. Just before Gyarados could begin to look around its surroundings and start rampaging, Misty returned it and sent out Starmie, confusing Surge before he angrily ordered Elekid to use a Thunderbolt to punish Misty for trying to play mind games with him, only for Misty to counter it by calling for their still unmastered Light Screen, then following up with a tackle from Starmie, as the electricity had almost completely dissipated in midair before Starmie had slammed into Elekid hard. Not unaware of a strategy like this, Surge had made sure that Elekid knew the move Brick Break for situations just like this, and sent it in to use the move, only for Misty to again switch out her Pokemon for Gyarados. As Elekid was already moving too fast to stop, it was once again intimidated before an ineffective attack glanced off of Gyarados and it angrily smacked it away with its tail. The electric type held tough though and caught itself, as Surge ordered it to finish it with Thunder, though Misty had already switched it out for Squirtle before Gyarados could rampage and ordered it to withdraw on its sail using Mirror Code. To Surge's horror, the Thunderbolt bounced off Squirtle, and it almost doubled in size before slamming into Elekid, who after stacking damage, fell. The winner of the first match was announced as Surge told Misty he realized her game. She was using Gyarados to lower his attacks, Starmie to render his long-range moves useless, and Squirtle to throw the attacks right back at him. It was smart, but cowardly in his opinion.
Raichu was out next, and he bragged that the two of them had done some major training over the past week or so, and that he knew her game now. Misty decided to leave Squirtle in, however, and smirked at Surge to bring it on, cause she knew they trained twice as hard. Wanting to test that out, Surge ordered Raichu to go full throttle and use Volt Tackle, to which Misty simply ordered Squirtle to use his newly learned Protect. The electrified takedown simply bounced off the shield of energy, but it was clear that Raichu still took recoil damage from it. And not letting go of her momentum, Misty had Squirtle fire a water gun into Raichu's face as it winced as the water hit home with enough strength to make Raichu skid back. Surge then ordered a Thunderbolt, but Misty this time told Squirtle to just do as they practiced, and like with Silver, the water type ended up burrowing into the wet ground that its water gun had softened for it, as the electricity sailed harmlessly overhead. Thinking back to the days before, Misty had held saving Charmeleon twice in a row over its head in order to convince it to help her teach Dig to Squirtle. The fire type behind her snorted in some pride in its teaching ability as the battle continued. though Surge surprised them when he ordered Raichu to use his own dig and use Volt Tackle once again. Unprepared, Squirtle burst up from the ground with Raichu as electricity surged around it and it was rendered unconscious. After returning him, Misty thanked Squirtle for an amazing battle before she called Starmie out. And just as Ash did, she claimed this would be the clincher and ordered a light screen again. Knowing the trick, Surge ordered Raichu to run in and use his Thunder Punch, but Misty reached for Gyarados' Pokeball as if to switch out, causing Surge to cancel his order and tell Raichu to dig so he didn't get intimidated. And as soon as he did, Misty revealed her trick in ordering Starmie to fire off a Rider Gun into the newly made hole, forcing Raichu to break through the ground from the force of the makeshift geyser, forcing it to slam through the ground and back out into the open, wet and dazed. Taking advantage of the confusion, Misty had Starmie unleash a barrage of Swifts and Water Guns until the rodent fell unconscious as well. Surge was stunned. Misty had completely turned his full tilt attack style against him by using strategic pivots and a perfect combination of moves. Arguably battling better than both Ash and Silver, it was now clear why Misty was Kanto's youngest gym leader, and as such, he awarded her the Thunder Badge, but mentioned he now wanted a rematch one day where she fought fair and square. Happy, Misty celebrates her win as Brock comes to congratulate her and asks her to give him Squirtle to take back to the Pokemon Center for treatment, as Surge went to speak to her a bit longer, mostly about what her training had consisted of, where Ash was, and Charmeleon. Surge then surprisingly offered Misty the same opportunity for special training under him and offered to help Starmie master his Thunderbolt before releasing a Pokemon she'd never seen before. Surge introduced her to Electivire and asked it to go with Misty to the training room to help her with something. But Electivire got angry and argued back with his trainer that it didn't want to babysit, it wanted to test its new power and start more training, as since its loss to Ash's Fearoz and Electabuzz, its pride had been damaged. But Surge assured it he'd get it a decent training session soon, causing the giant lightning ogre to begrudgingly agree. Misty remarked that she was surprised that Surge could get along so well with such an aggressive and powerful Pokemon, revealing she really couldn't control Gyarados. But Surge advises her that it wasn't about control, it's about working together. Same goes for any trainer worth their salt. If she gave Gyarados a healthy amount of respect and continued to grow, they'd naturally come to understand each other and respect one another. Then shocking Misty to how sage-like the lieutenant could be, as he then shooed her off with Electivire.
Surge waited for his next challenger, but when no one else showed up within the hour, he realized that Misty hadn't left the training room yet and went to investigate. There, he found her with Charmeleon and Starmie out, having a mock battle with Electivire of all things. Surge recognized that Misty's maturity and foresight was a bit greater than Ash's, as when he sent him in to train, Ash didn't really use the opportunity to do much more than just master Thunderfang. This kid was also a prodigy, and it was interesting enough to cause Surge to join them in her training session. During this, Ash had been losing pretty handily against Mr. Fuzi and his monster Snorlax. Oddish had been the first to fall. Then Fear of Speed had proved itself meaningless in the face of Snorlax's bulk, causing Ash to jump directly to Croagunk, who after being hit with a single double edge was sent sailing back through the woods, even knocking down a couple of trees, as it did to Ash and especially Meowth's surprise and horror. When it came to asking Meowth to battle, he absolutely refused and climbed up on Ash's back to berate him. They lost this one, and they're gonna have to accept it.
Richie consoles Ash by stating he did about as well as Richie did, while Mr. Fuji thanks Snorlax and promised to bring it a big dinner soon as the massive beast simply laid down to return to sleep. He then joined the two boys after Ash had sent Meowth off with Krokorok's Pokeball to retrieve it, and the old man offered Ash a thanks for a thrilling battle as well as a tip to both boys. In Saffron City to the west of Lavender Town, there's a fighting dojo, and he is old friends with the karate master there who used to run it as a gym. He advises both boys to travel there and speak with him as he may be able to help them find a way to deal with Snorlax. With no better plans, as Richie had already found a roadblock in his training, the two decide to follow the advice and plan to leave for Saffron the next morning. Starting to tire of running around so much and noticing Ash wasn't the happiest with his refusing to battle twice, Meowth decides to go ahead and call in a favor from his new grunts. The next morning, as Richie and Ash are preparing to leave for Saffron, the ace trainers who gifted Meowth to Ash make their reappearance. They explain themselves as having come to Lavender to visit the Pokemon Tower, and feign happiness at catching back up with Ash and Meowth, as Ash bragged that Meowth had become a pillar of the team whenever he wasn't being so lazy. Kinda shocking Jesse and James at how close the two seem to be getting, but nonetheless, they offer to take the two trainers to Saffron City with them, their hot air balloon, which Ash and Richie found strangely modeled after Meowth. During the flight, in curiosity of how far Meowth had gotten, the two asked the children if they'd heard of Team Rocket before, to which the boys responded vaguely, but they didn't really know anything about them. Meowth gave the two a sign to cut it out, but they ignored him in order to attempt a smooth lie about Team Rocket being less so a criminal organization and much more some kind of heroic Robin Hood-like group who steal Pokemon from bad trainers and place them in happy and safe homes. Remember, the quicker Ash got with the Team Rocket program, the quicker they could stop shadowing him. This lie actually ends up reminding Ash of how Meowth helped Charmander out. Meanwhile, Meowth recognizes his former partners had likely just made his job much harder, as now Ash would have to have another preconceived notion to get over when the truth was finally revealed.
However, with the balloon's aid, the group was able to arrive at Saffron extremely quickly. Meanwhile, back in Vermilion, after a night-long training session with Lieutenant Surge, he and Misty finally returned to the Pokemon Center to get their teams healed up. As they spoke about Misty's next move, she explains that she still had nearly 3 weeks or so before her and her friends would be meeting up to participate in the SSAN tournament. Surge is intrigued. He suggests that Misty continues to challenge the gyms by taking on gyms that are directly in opposition of her type specialty, so he suggests that she head to Celadon City to challenge the grass type gym. Misty didn't think that this was a bad idea by any means, but she doesn't have the time to make it there and back before the SSAN tournament. But Surge surprises her by offering to give her a ride in his truck, as he fairly often visits Celadon himself. He had been there in the last few days to buy a special item which to help Electabuzz evolve into Electivire. Misty happily accepts, having come to see that Surge was very likable past his tough bravado. It even reminded her of Ash a bit actually. Hopping into Surge's military-style Jeep, the two were off to Celadon.
Meanwhile, still in Vermilion, Brock has been really learning a lot, as well as having earned a lot of Nurse Joy's respect and trust, as she had begun to delegate more complex tasks to him as the month went on, until she had enough faith in him to have him work on Pokemon while she went and handled other things. It's gotten to the point that she had suggested that Brock could easily have the talent to become a Pokemon doctor if he applied himself, giving him some pause. However, before he could dwell on the thought much longer, another of his favorite beauties in the form of the local officer Jenny interrupted them, as she frantically burst into the Pokemon Center and explained she needed Joy's help on an urgent assignment. Apparently, a group of criminals had been wreaking havoc as of late, and she had multiple people and Pokemon in need of medical attention. Nurse Joy was shocked and concerned, but hesitant to leave the Pokemon Center, only for Brock to offer to accompany Officer Jenny instead. However, Jenny wasn't the one who'd been building trust in the 15-year-old, and so refused, specifying she needed a professional. With a bit of reluctance, Joy decided she would go before patting Brock on the back and telling him she would be leaving him and Bulbasaur in charge while she was away. He instantly took the task very seriously and promised to do his best, as Jenny rushed Joy along, claiming the evil organization Team Rocket weren't going to get the best of their city. Team Rocket, Brock mused, thinking he'd definitely heard that name before.
A good distance away in Saffron City, the likes of Ash and Richie had finally found themselves at the karate dojo, after having a bit of trouble finding the small building in the large city. It was actually a bit run down compared to everything else, but nonetheless, they entered confidently. They found a scene of a few grown men doing physical training alongside a bunch of fighting-type Pokemon. Instantly, everyone present took notice to the two boys and the Meow, who now looked extremely nervous and out of place, though the old man, obviously in charge, who wasn't standing with the other two, calmly asked why they have come here. Regaining their composure, Ash and Richie explained their battles against Mr. Fuji and his encouragement to come here to see the karate master. Said man then chuckled, as he said he should have known the old man was behind this. Ever since the dojo lost its gym certification and Bruno had left to join the Elite Four, it had been rather boring, leaving him to simply train with his final two students. Ash seemed a bit disheartened hearing that, as he had hoped that this would be another secret gym recognized by the league like Fuji's. However, the karate master stressed that he could likely help the boys on one condition. They had to battle his students with the Pokemon they had the absolute strongest bond with. Ash seemed a bit hesitant, cause it currently seemed like it was a waste of time. However, Richie convinced him to give it a shot, since they come all the way here, to which Ash had to agree, and besides, he wasn't one to truly turn down battles. In the next few minutes, the karate master was standing between the two boys and the remaining students, ready to referee and watch their battles closely. He was mighty interested in the two foreign Pokemon they wielded, in Krokorok and Dune, but nevertheless, he told his students to hold nothing back, and to sink their hearts with Machoke and Primeape.
For Ash and Krokorok, it was fairly clear that they were stronger, but after Primeape tanked a fairly powerful looking Crunch, its trainer ordered to lash out using that anger it just built up with its revenge attack, as the pig monkey glowed an angry orange and began to thrash around roughly, smacking the crocodile back almost as hard as Snorlax had. However, he held strong and fired back with his Sand Tomb and Crunch combo, finally putting it down. The karate master nodded his head, noticing something before switching his attention. Richie and Dune were using their speed to zip around Machoke, knowing its greater power would mean getting caught by it would be devastating. Though they were caught off guard when the other student ordered superpower, and suddenly the massive Pokemon almost doubled its speed and instantly caught up to Dune before slamming it to the ground with enough strength to crack it repeatedly, only for Richie to encourage Dune to hang in there and use his multiple legs to catch Machoke's fist, where he surprisingly was able to muscle out from being pinned by it before blasting with a point-blank Dragon Breath that rendered it unconscious as well. The karate master seemed pretty pleased, as both boys had lots of potential, amounts he hadn't seen since Bruno actually. With the matches over, the karate master stood and went about healing all the Pokemon who fought so well. before looking to his older two students and telling them that he was proud of them, but this was a sure sign it was time for them to continue on their journeys and continue to advance, and that they should reflect on this loss as they did. The two then bowed to their master before leaving, as the karate master then addressed Ash, Richie, Croc-Rock, and Dune, and claimed that they weren't done as of yet, as he wanted to challenge them this time, actually asking them to take him on in a tag battle as he released two Pokemon, a Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee.
Not exactly sure where this was going, the boys reluctantly agreed, while Meowth watched on, curiously trying to figure out what all this training was about. It seemed like basic battling. However, it quickly became apparent the karate master was using the battle to teach Croc-Rock and Dune something. The Hitmonchan battling Croc-Rock seemed tougher than even the primate, and for a long while the karate master ordered it to simply put its hands up in the guard position, as Croc-Rock continued to hammer away at it, while Hitmonlee was ordered to grapple with Dune similar to the way Machoke did. Quickly, Ash and Richie began to understand something was up, as the karate master explained the powerful moves Revenge and Superpower, something Meowth paid close attention to, as he was interested in the study of the application of different moves ever since he had begun teaching Thief to himself. Both moves were fairly simple and obviously fighting type, and the karate master claimed that he had seen the capability for Croc-Rock to learn Revenge and Dune to learn Superpower. He told the boys to order the moves as he did for himself for Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan, and the two sides went back and forth until it was clear that Croc-Rock and Dune were both at their limits, while simultaneously picking up the attacks better and better. Meanwhile, the karate master's Pokemon were nearly unharmed and seemed capable of going even further if it need be. However, as the boys and their partners rallied, the master called an end to the match, as he and his two Pokemon bowed to their students, having conceded it.
The boys were pretty surprised, but at the same time, recognized they definitely weren't going to win at that rate, and so thanked their starters for their hard work as well, and congratulated them on successfully learning their new moves. The karate master then called the boys closer, and though he admitted these are useless now, he handed them two of the old badges the gym would hand out when it was still official, which was a large reason as to his awarding badges even without being defeated, and he specified that they'd need to go and battle Sabrina if they wanted a valid Saffron City badge. The boys were curious as to who Sabrina was, but didn't really get to dwell on the thought, as the karate master explained he also had a gift for the two, as he felt they were more than qualified to receive it. The Hitmonlee and Chan the boys battled had actually been two of the three starter Pokemon that his own master had handed down to him, and while he was by no means an expert in Pokemon breeding, he had learned enough to be able to do so himself for his students or trainers he felt were exceptionally deserving of such a rare gift.
He produced two more Pokeballs and told their inhabitants to come out, producing two identical humanoid Pokemon. Ash and Richie used their Pokedex and learned that the Pokemon are called Tyrogue. The master then explains that one Tyrogue was far more focused on attacking than defending, while its brother was much more reserved and balanced of the two options. Nevertheless, he offered the boy a choice on which one they wanted. Richie only currently had Dune, Foxy, and Happy, so a fighting type Pokemon would make his rematch against Mr. Fuji much easier. Ash surprisingly was a bit more hesitant, as he realized up to this point none of his team additions had been consensual meetings like this one he was being gifted. Furo was caught out of necessity so he didn't die, Meowth was admittedly dumped on him, Oddish was pretty much bum rushed and then he spoke to her later, and Charmeleon, the most devastating of the bunch, had been a Pokemon that outright refused to join him. He hadn't thought about it too much, but that honestly hurt his pride as a trainer a little bit. Sensing this, the karate master asked Ash if the Croc-Rock was a part of the dark type, which Ash confirmed. He then reminded Ash that dark types were weak against fighting, so taking a Tyrogue could be critical in its partner's development. Not to mention, it was his personal opinion that all fledgling trainers should raise at least one fighting type Pokemon, as their typing and mindset was a great way to impart a crucial lesson onto them. There is always someone out there that is stronger.
Ash still seemed a bit hesitant, until Meowth patted him on the leg and gave him a big confident grin, as if encouraging him to not doubt himself. It was actually one of the most genuine interactions he'd ever had with the cat, where it wasn't clearly trying to hide his emotions. So after Richie had his first pick of the balanced Tyrogue, Ash happily accepted the attack Tyrogue and welcomed it to the team. Tyrogue seemed truly excited to be going on a journey with a strong trainer, and Meowth even slightly told Ash as much. Before they left, the karate master suggested that the boys walk with their new Pokemon and spend some time getting to know them better, so as to sync their hearts up as quickly as possible. He also asked for them to both drop by again sometime, so he could one day challenge them both to a real battle. The two boys smiled before joining the karate master in a respectful bow and leaving the dojo soon after. They were actually pretty surprised to realize most of the day was already gone, as night was soon approaching, and Ash reasoned even though the Ace trainers weren't around, if they started on the road now, they could reach Lavender Town again by the next night. But Richie actually surprised them by revealing he was now planning to take on the mysterious Sabrina before he rematched Mr. Fuji on his way back to Vermilion City before the end of the month, as there was a tournament he planned on participating in there. Ash then remembered that he did see Richie's name on the sign-up list, and revealed that he'd be facing him there as well with a confident grin. He then thought about it and decided he wanted to defeat Mr. Fuji before he focused on any of the gym leaders. It was just a compulsion he had, Not to mention, he was honestly starting to miss Brock and Misty. A bit saddened at having to do so, but more fired up than ever, the two friendly rivals parted ways as Ash, Meowth, and Tyrogue headed for their rematch. And the time alone with Meowth and their new recruit was actually perfect, as now Meowth could openly translate conversation between Tyrogue and Ash, and the two spoke about all kinds of things from their dreams and what their early lives were like, and especially battling topics, such as what moves Tyrogue currently knew, those being Tackle, Fake Out, Foresight, and Low Kick. Ash and Meowth then fired Tyrogue up as they explained the story of the monstrous Snorlax they were currently on their way to face. Speaking of, ever since they'd faced it, Meowth had been steadily thinking of a way to take it down, and he revealed that he had a plan he was pretty confident in. And just in time too, as night fell and they decided to camp out between Saffron and Lavender, where Ash decided on a quick late night training session to begin practicing Meowth's strategy. A few days later, Mr. Fuji once again answered a knock on the door and was happy to see Ash back once again. He asked where Richie was, and Ash did tell him, but then confidently asked him for another battle, and the old man could see in his eyes that Ash was truly confident this time. He agreed, but did warn Ash that after this next one, he'd have to wait for a little while, since it was already becoming kind of expensive to reward Snorlax for battling so much. Ash was fine with that. He'd even so excited that he and Meowth ran forward ahead of Mr. Fuji, and when he got there, he saw the two rummaging through Ash's backpack for food to give Snorlax so it could get up and be ready for battle. But it didn't stand until it smelled Mr. Fuji approaching with another large bag of apples. Once again sat across from Mr. Fuji as he reminded Ash he could take Snorlax on 6-1, the Viridian City Gym Trainer turned his hat backwards and sent out Oddish.
As the match began, Ash ordered Oddish to use the move it had recently learned, and Meowth revealed to be her favorite attack, in Moonblast, the fairy-type move, but it didn't even phase Snorlax, who Fuji had countered by ordering an Earthquake. Ash, however, seemed to be waiting on that, because as Snorlax raised up the food, Ash ordered Oddish to rush Snorlax, and to execute a move that Fuji was unfamiliar with, Pretty Poison. Just as Oddish reached Snorlax, it began to quake the ground. The little weed Pokemon spun as fast as she could, mid-air, and began to release a copious amount of poison powder, directly in front of Snorlax's face, as Ash thought back to Meowth's coaching. If Oddish wants to look pretty while she fights, then all we need to do is give her a pretty way to fight. I'm sure we can think of something, kid. While it took a bit of convincing, Ash had worked on a way to deliver poison powder that Oddish thought was elegant, by having her spin and release the purple dust in a small whirlwind, almost like Richie and Happy's combo attack. Unable to avoid it, Snorlax inhaled the dust deeply and obviously became poison, causing both Ash and Meowth to cheer, as Meowth's research had given them about a 33% chance of Snorlax having the immunity ability, but thankfully, Fuji's monster didn't. However, when Oddish landed on the ground, it was still quaking, and with that vast power difference, she was knocked out, but not before Snorlax winced in pain at poison damaging it. Ash then returned to Oddish, and had to thank it for battling. Even though it was short, he recognized the compromise she made to get them this far, and even Mr. Fuji praised the smart plan. Though, he clarified it wasn't something the two old partners didn't know how to deal with. Ash remarked he was well aware, and sent out Furo next. The plan for her hadn't changed much, except by one suggestion by Meowth, who had already dug into his backpack and produced something he had received a while ago. The King's Rock Brock had gifted him after defeating him. Just as the massive bird was released, Meowth leapt from Ash's back onto Hirsch, in which she squawked in protest as he sat the little rock on her head crest, and told her to complain after she won. The plan was to use the rock's strange ability to encourage flinching in the opponent, and Firo's ability to land critical hits. It seemed like as good a plan as any.
With the next battle ready to start, and Snorlax now on a ticking clock, Mr. Fuji took the aggressive stance and ordered Snorlax to rush down the bird with Double Edge. However, as they usually did, Ash and Firo used agility to dodge, and much like Silver had done, took advantage of Snorlax's lack of reach, letting its Double Edge miss harmlessly, as Fuji attempted to use Snorlax's surprising speed once or twice more before deciding Ash and Firo could take it. As Snorlax was being whittled down more and more by poison, he ordered Snorlax to use Hyper Beam. To Ash and Firo's shock, she had just barely dodged the powerful attack, as it sailed into the air and actually clipped the end of her wing, but Firo held strong, deciding she wasn't losing twice in a row. As now, Snorlax had to sit still to recharge, and winced in pain again as it was hit with poison. She and Ash saw the opportunity for payback, and having been on the receiving end of one in the first battle, Firo had learned a new move herself, as Ash ordered a Double Edge of their own that slammed directly into Snorlax's belly, making the massive Pokemon skid back a tiny bit before Firo was thrown back and had to right herself in the air, only for Ash to order her to keep blasting with Double Edge, as clearly Snorlax was getting more and more tired out. Just when Snorlax had regained its movement, it struck back with a body slam that Firo, now tired from all the recoil, dodged only to land in a nearby tree, as Ash smirked and ordered Roost. Again, Mr. Fuji found himself impressed by the tactic, but revealed he and Snorlax could do that too, as he ordered a rest, and Snorlax simply dropped back onto its belly and went to sleep. Damning the fact that Snorlax could now heal its poison damage and all the hard work that Fearow had put in, he nevertheless told Fearow to take advantage and shower Snorlax in all the aerial aces, fury attacks, and double edge she could, creating a hail of endless blows until Snorlax finally woke up again with a glint in his eyes as Fuji calmly ordered another Hyper Beam. Fearow was then hit point blank, causing a large explosion that covered the two in smoke as the trainer stared and waited for it to clear, revealing Snorlax standing just fine while Fearow had been knocked out, but didn't look any worse than she had when she was struck by lightning, thankfully. Just before Ash could return her for a well-deserved rest, Meowth signaled for him to wait as he ran to Fearow and gingerly removed the King's Rock, before patting her on her side and saying something super quietly before Ash went ahead and returned her. Meowth was claiming the next battle spot, as he himself put the King's Rock on. He had made sure to master Slash, as it was a move with a higher crit chance than most, and paired with the King's Rock, it gave him some confidence against Snorlax.
As soon as Snorlax winced again, Fuji ordered it to use Body Slam, which scared Meowth with the idea of being crushed. However, calling back to its battle with Geodude, he began to kind of dance around Snorlax to dodge it, while extending its white glowing claws as far as he could, and went into a mad slashing frenzy. Recognizing the small cat's ability to weave around Snorlax so effortlessly, and that all the critical hits, flinching and poisoning damage was indeed taking a toll on Snorlax, Fuji called for an earthquake, but Ash ordered Meowth to jump onto its back and to keep using Slash. Snorlax's bulk was something to be marveled at as this continued, until Fuji noticed that the limits of its endurance were getting closer and again just ordered a rest. With Snorlax once again asleep, Ash had Meowth keep up the non-stop attacks, though it was clear he was starting to tire. And to both their shock and horror, they realized that they had not seen all of the massive Pokemon's moves, as Fuji called for a snore, causing Snorlax to randomly slam into Meowth with a double edge. It was clearly the strongest attack that Meowth had ever taken, and the pain was unbearable, but the fact that it was sent flying backwards, and remember the sight of Crocoroach snapping trees with its body, caused Meowth to close its eye in fear, as he'd soon be a smear on the forest. Only a thud into Ash, who had jumped to catch him, just in time before the two prettily harmlessly hit a tree. With a sigh of relief, Meowth began to faint from exhaustion and the sheer panic he had just felt, never having been so thankful his trainer was so tender-hearted.
Ash, still cradling Meowth, gingerly stood back up, wincing a little, as Mr. Fuji began to hysterically apologize, as when using Snore, his partner couldn't do as well to hold back his power, even running over as fast as his elderly body could get him there to check on the boy. But Ash assured him they were okay, and vehemently asked to finish the battle. Mr. Fuji was a bit hesitant, but the look on Ash's face made him impossible to deny, and he went back to his side just as Snorlax woke up. Taking his jacket off, Ash made Meowth a little bed to rest on as he sent out Tyrogue and quickly explained the situation. It was now up to him and Crocoroach. Just like with the other Pokemon, Ash had Tyrogue hammer away at Snorlax as much as he could, while also having it, like Meowth, use its size and speed to jump and roll away from its counterattacks. Low Kick proved difficult for Snorlax to deal with, as its weight made it smash into the ground hard and take big damage, all on top of still being affected by the poison. However, Snorlax surprised Ash and Tyrogue by lunging on all fours towards Tyrogue for a body slam, but Ash, thinking quickly, told Tyrogue to dive under Snorlax's legs and use Low Kick again, resulting in an obvious critical hit where Snorlax flipped over itself and slammed its head painfully into the ground. Mr. Fuji was surprised, but Ash and Tyrogue relentlessly kept up the assault with tackle attacks as Snorlax got back up, seemingly pretty angry, and without being ordered to, attempted to crush Tyrogue with another body slam. This time though, it jumped, and nearly succeeded in making a pancake, though the little fighting type showed a massive amount of strength Ash hadn't expected, and simply fell to his back and drove both his legs into Snorlax's belly in a desperate leg press for a solid second or two as he held it in the air before his legs began to quake and Ash fumbled to return the little Pokemon before Snorlax could smash into it.
He should have known. As he began to get to know Tyrogue, he realized that it wasn't the kind of Pokemon who liked to evade, and he had likely felt that that's all it had been doing since the battle began. By this point though, even though it was now the literal last chance he had to defeat Mr. Fuji and Snorlax, Ash felt more confident than ever. Snorlax looked super tired and was currently huffing and puffing, as it still had to deal with Oddish's poison, not to mention rest seemed to be getting less effective as it was used in succession. Resting his head against the Pokeball first, Ash sent out his one and only starter, as Crocoroach already knew the hopes and efforts of all of its teammates. The The battle was one of insanity, as Snorlax, closing in on its limits, rushed towards Krokorok, who, unlike the first battle, where Ash had it play much more evasively, met its charge and clashed with it before lashing out with a crunch. However, Snorlax quickly grabbed Krokorok in an attempt to throw it. Krokorok simply lashed onto it with its jaws, as it did before, but once again, it was hit with a terribly powerful double edge that sent it sailing back, though Ash could not save it like he had with Meow. However, this time though, he did not panic, and he actually yelled out his next order, telling the ground type to dig into the ground to reduce the damage and come back up and finish it off with revenge. Snorlax was truly on its last legs and already staggering, but just as Mr. Fuji ordered a rest, Krokorok came bursting through the ground with an orange glow, and like a bullet, it slammed its fist into Snorlax's jaw with an uppercut that snapped its head back and causes Snorlax's feet to leave the ground before it fell on its back with its eyes swirling. They did it. Krokorok and Ash jumped for joy at overcoming the greatest challenge they had had to date, as Mr. Fuji smiled softly and saw to dealing with Snorlax. Mr. Fuji praised his thinking in battle and his willingness to keep pushing his team while knowing their limits. Ash had the makings of a great trainer, and Fuji claimed that in his years he had seen and battled some of Kanto's best in their starts. As such, he was happy to award Ash with his badge, that he called the Normal Badge, and for good measure, a few spare citrus and orange berries Snorlax had left in its tired state, as it would now want a much bigger meal.
The celebration continued as Mr. Fuji and Ash began to return to the town, mostly speaking about Ash's plans to participate in the SSN tournament, and Fuji having some trouble ever remembering there being such a tournament in Kanto. When they were ready to part ways, Ash good-naturedly warned Mr. Fuji that Richie would likely come for his rematch soon, before the end of the month, and he'd be even stronger than ever. Mr. Fuji welcomed the challenge, as they were a distraction from how admittedly boring his quiet little town could be, since not as many people visited Pokemon Tower anymore, and he suggested that Ash go there at some point himself. And in the spirit of mentioning future battles with friends, Mr. Fuji warned Ash to make sure he was well prepared if he decided to challenge the Cinnabar Island Gym, as his old friend Blaine ran it, though he hadn't heard from him in a good while, and so Ash asked to tell him to give Mr. Fuji a call if he did battle him. After saying goodbye, Ash entered the Pokemon Center and quickly got Meowth and the rest of the team into the care of Nurse Joy, for his excitement at defeating such a major talent caused him to jump at the opportunity to update his sponsor and place the call to Giovanni. He wasn't sure if he'd pick up, as it only been a while ago since they spoke last. The line opened to show Giovanni with a very grave look on his face before the man purposely lightened his visage and claimed how happy he was to hear from Ash, as he had a very important mission for him. With that, Plus Ultra Fam and Ronin Clan is where we'll be leaving this story off for right now. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this one, though it was fairly long, so we'll just get into our outro now. Be sure to help support Ronin and I by making sure you're subscribed to both channels, leave a like on our videos, and a comment about your thoughts, as both are great ways to please the YouTube algorithm. Plus, we just like to see big numbers get bigger. It gives us a shot of dopamine and encouragement, as well as makes us able to continue making better and better content for you all. You can find all the links to our important socials and Ronin's channel in the description below. I missed out on the Patreon shoutouts last time, so I want to make sure we get them in this time. In Hero Tier, Lumber Quays, Stefan Conference, Samuel Viveros, Arcana of the Heart, and James Holland. In Shinobi Tier, Shannon Roberts and Jay Ray. In Z-Warrior Tier, Narku and Normandy 1998. In Beyond Tier, Knuckles OX, Pizza 15X, and Don. And in the Plus Ultra Tier, DJ the Lazy Gamer, Zach Haji, Zachary Hayes, and Crimson Manifesto. As always, thank you guys so much. It means the world that you support me in the way you do, and a lot of the times, you guys are the ones keeping the lights on here, so thank you. That will do it for us this time though, and you know the drill. Please be sure to take care of yourselves, each other, and the world around you. Remember, Black Lives Matter and that trans rights are human rights. And as always, be sure to go beyond Plus Ultra. And we'll see you guys next time.